When I was young, we still had those simple black box phones, and it was primitive in the sense that when somebody called you and it was a missed call, no way to trace where it came from. So, okay, once in my apartment, phone rang. I picked it up, and a voice said, I think the name was Christina, I'm not sure. Is Christina there? There was no Christina in my apartment at no point, so it was clear that it was a missed call. I didn't do it, but immediately I was tempted to say something like, oh, sorry, this is medical urgency service, Christina just had a heart attack, she will probably die, and put it off. You know what's the idea? Like, I'm purely neutral. I cause catastrophe, but that's the obsessional neurotic stance. I cause catastrophe, but I'm nowhere to be seen. Nobody can trace it back to me. I don't know when I identify with this role of, you're just this quite literally vanishing mediator, You cause a catastrophe, but you are nowhere to be, and you don't know it. This I considered never in my life almost did I feel as satisfied. You probably don't know this story, it's one of my early books. When I was in Paris studying with Miller and so on, I was pretty poor, so I simply stayed with a friend of mine, French psychoanalyst, and I was sleeping in his analytic room with a couch. No, but anyway, the trick was this one day. He and two of his other friends had an apartment where there were 3 rooms, each room was the room for an analyst. So once I returned home, I knew that my friend will not have patience, and I heard some rumors, so I knew that I must be very silent because the analysis was going on in the other 2 rooms. So I entered this room, just silently. I put off, because I bought my books, I changed my jacket, and left. Where was the catastrophe? Then, turning out to leave the room, I noticed, I'm obsessional neurotic, a book on the table there. On the table. And I immediately knew it, this book doesn't fit there. I couldn't resist my sense of order. I pick up the book and put it on the bookshelf where it belonged. This almost caused madness. You know why? Because in the next room was a friend of my friend. And later I learned what I caused by this. He didn't hear anything. He was absolutely sure that nobody was in the apartment. But this is what happened. That analyst next room, borrowed that book from my friend in whose room I was sleeping. And just before I entered the apartment, he put the room there on the table and wanted to put it into a bookshelf, but since his patient arrived, he wasn't able to finish it, so he left there. After a short session, he came back. That's how it appeared to him. What happened? I know clearly that I left the book there. The book is on the bookshelf there. The guy who had some other traumatic experiences, love breakdown, he was very nervous. He thought he is losing his mind. How did I learn this? The same evening, I was having dinner with my friend, whose room that was, and my friend told me, if you meet that guy, please be careful how you deal with him. He is on the edge of a nervous breakdown, losing sense of reality. I said, what happened? And he said, this guy, he already has visions, puts book there. He thinks he's crazy. Okay, I explained it and so on, but I felt so good, It was my ideal role. I just intervened, nobody knew, you see the parallel between this and that phone conversation. This is freedom. You are in this free space, you can do whatever you want, it will be not attributed to you, That's the closest I can come to freedom. But let's go on. Sorry for that phone call. So, Brian's point is that if we widen our focus and include other actants, other processes, in social reality that influence our decisions, like biased media reports, economic pressure on workers, threats of losing employment, material limitations, and so on, the absence of ecological engagement becomes much more understanding. This would have been a very simple example of what Latour calls politic of things. Again, if you look at it as a pure ideological process, of course you can say, we know there is danger of global warming and so on, how come that we don't act? And then you have to go through these pseudo-complex, pseudo-Marxist theories, ideological mystification, whatever. But if you simply take into account the politics of things, all other material and so on processes which define your situation, in a minute it becomes much more understandable. So, again, assemblage. Which features of assemblage did I forget to mention before? One is, and it's very nicely deployed by Levi-Bryant, what he calls flat ontology, as opposed to hierarchy of beings. There are no ontologically privileged agents which can totalize reality. Human subjects are just one in the series of disparate objects. And I have a certain sympathy for this view, you know, which is an ideal example. I hope you know it. It's even raising on the stock market of best films of all times. You know, it's very interesting to follow how, like, in the 50s, it was the time of Eisenstein Potemkin. It was usually voted by critics the greatest film of all times. Then it was, for some 20 years, I think, it was the time of Citizen Kane. Now it's Hitchcock Vertigo. We will see it will remain. But, sorry?
Which one?
Vertigo. Vertigo is now. It was a couple of years ago. Let's see if you voted, whatever this means. But what I'm trying to tell you is that, and I think there is justice in this second feature. The highest Russian film of Russian silent classics is no longer Eisenstein. It's now Giga Vertov, Man with a Movie Camera, the documentary. And I think it deserves to be. It's a mega film. Why? This is not all about this film. Just one feature. Jacques Rancière. Once I was with him at some seminar in Sassfeld, Switzerland, and he gave a wonderful paper on Man with a Movie Camera as a practice of cinematic communism. He gave a wonderful, simple reading of how the point of this film is that it's not communist at all in the sense of official propaganda. You see no parades, nothing. It just presents this multiplicity of life forms in everyday life. I think it takes place in Odessa, which ironically is the city of Potemkin, Eisenstein, you know, that famous scene on the stairs. Okay, what happens is that you see, for example, washing the hair, wrapping packages, playing piano, connecting phone wires, dancing ballet, cleaning the streets, whatever. All these activities are entangled through echoing different formal motives, circular motives, and so on and so on. And according to Rancière, what makes this cinematic practice communist is the underlying assertion of the radical univocity of being. All the displayed phenomena are somehow equalized. All the usual hierarchies and oppositions, inclusive of the official communist opposition between the old and the new, are magically suspended. And I think it really works in that way. That's the beauty of it. Again, that's for me much closer to the actual communism. You have a worker working in a steel factory, you have a hairdresser lady washing somebody's hair, and so on and so on, and all this is put at the same level. So that, the only problem I have with univocity of being is that as I will try to develop later. Of course, in principle, I am for it at this level, that there is no hierarchy of beings, higher beings, God on the top, and so on. But where I oppose it is that nonetheless, I think, there is a certain twisted order of beings where, within a certain form of life, there is something which stands for its negativity, if I may put it like this. This is where subject enters, and this is what I miss in the flat ontology of Levi, Bryan, Harman, and so on and so on. I will come later to this. Then the next feature is that I maybe forgot to emphasize, but I mentioned it yesterday, is material versus expressive aspect of elements. That is to say, apart from acting as bearers of meaning, objects in our universe also matter and are active on account of their direct materiality. The moment we abandon anthropocentrism and locate humanity as one of the agents, although a privileged one, into the assemblage of things, the distinction between material and expressive levels becomes necessary, since expressive level pertains only to human beings, and even in their case it is not exclusive. Say, human production is organized and kept functioning through symbolic exchanges, but it also involves material processes of tremendous importance, exploiting natural resources and so on and so on. So that's Bryan's big point, that traditional Marxist critique of ideology focuses on just ideological meaning of processes, but it neglects not only material weight, but even ideological weight of material processes as such. Again, as I already pointed out, I have no problem with this insight. I even agree with me, even if it's formulated critically against me. But yesterday I improvised in a clumsy way. I remember I already gave you the big counter-argument. It's a very simple one. It's easy to say that we should think language, we should link our social practice in the unity of material and expressive aspects. For example, the production of process is, of course, an expression of our creative capacities and so on. But it's also a very material process on our Earth which can throw off balance the entire circulation of life and so on and so on. So how to think the two together? I think it's easy to say we should think them together. It's much more difficult, I claim, to do it. Because I claim, as I already pointed out yesterday in my, I remember, confused, clumsy improvisations, that precisely at its most radical, language, symbolic practice, cannot ever be simply reduced to one among the elements of the social totality. It's never really at the same level. Why? Of course it is language, symbolic exchange. It's always part of general social exchange. It's linked to our productive and destructive abilities and so on and so on. But at the same time, it's a totality. You cannot step out of meaning. You know, it is part of life, but at the same time, for us, humans, it's the horizon of how we perceive life. And it's the ultimate illusion that you can step out of yourself and, as it were, observe reality outside your horizon of meaning, your symbolic practice, and so on and so on. Here we now come upon the crucial moment. I hope I will have time to develop it, where it's my main reproach towards object-oriented ontology. especially Levi Bryant and Harman, they try to return to some, I claim, even very traditional realist ontology, where their point is simply that objects are ultimately impenetrable. We only see the external relational aspect of objects. You see how a thing appears to you. You perceive properties which have a certain practical significance for you. For example, when you have a hammer in your hand, your perception of it is always overdetermined by its potential use or uses, even if you are a murderer and want to break someone's head with it. But it's always this practical use. So Harman claims that objects have an inner wealth, a hidden side, which goes well beyond properties that we can perceive when we relate to objects. And that he even goes at some point, although he's not sure there. The last time I met him, I questioned him. I gave him a third degree on this point, because in one of his books, he even went up to the hypothesis of how do you call it in English? Psychism, how do you pronounce? Psychism, how do you make ism work?
Psychism.
Psychism, so yes, panpsychism. That object has an inner life which cannot be accessed by sciences, by objective sciences, and so on and so on. Here, up to a point, I sympathize with him. Of course, there is more in objects than their use. But I don't see any necessity to supplement or to ground this potential openness of certain objects. I'm even actively for it, like I think the only serious biology today, the intelligent version of Darwinism, has wonderful theorization of it. And I was shocked when I asked him that Harman didn't know about it. You know, this beautiful notion in evolutionary biology developed by Richard Lewontin and Stephen Jay Gould of exaptation. Not adaptation, but exaptation. That our organisms are not simply adapted. We always have too many organs. Like, how is it called, this, when the stupid organ that's usually... Yeah. That all our body is basically like that. And that the typical way of progress is a non-teleological one. It's that there is a new situation and body in its spontaneous adaptation doesn't know what to do and exapts. That is to say, transfunctionalizes, uses an object which is just there, automatically reproduced, like male breasts or whatever, nipples and so on, and uses it for a totally different function. And the beauty, I think it's the only correct theory, of Gould is that he even thinks our greatest achievement, maybe of humanity, language, emerged like this. That something happened at the level of adaptation with standing upwards, our brain, tongue, and so on, and all of a sudden there was an excess of tongue, of brain, whatever, which in a totally contingent way became the base of language. So that's the beauty that I like of his theory. Language did not develop in a direct functional way, as even such a basically good guy like Friedrich Engels claims. He puts in his short essay on the origin of through work, through labor, of man out of apes, how, when there was a need of collaboration, people simply found that they have something to say to each other, so they developed language. I think this is the most naive circular theory. It's the same one which you find a comical way of it in, I don't know which one, not Lilliputians, one of the 4 Gulliver books, where it gives a wonderfully naive theory of the origin of language. That first people communicated so that you had to carry on your back small models of objects. Like if you wanted to say house, you put the model of the house, you know. And I love this absolute naivety. And then one of the people said, again, the enigma, how did he say it, no? Said, but it's getting so heavy to carry all these objects, why don't we replace them with words? It's true, but you see what I mean, you already must be in language. So the beautiful idea here is that adaptation does not mean, Lamarck thought this, does not mean this direct teleological process. Social life gets complicated, so you need something like language, you invent it. No, no. It's always an excess, you don't know how to use it, and the use is always a priori secondary. So again, at this level, I disagree with Harman, because I don't think it's necessary at all, this duality of the way we relate to things and the way things are in themselves. Harman emphasizes this distinction because he claims that this is the wealth of things. Like certain things are constrained to their actual use, but in themselves they contain potentials for different uses and so on and so on. It may sound a harsh substantialist theory. Substantialist in the sense that outside, and this is Harman's position, outside network of relations, things exist in themselves with many more potentials, and then it depends on circumstances if these potential uses will be actualized or not. What's my problem here? Again, at some level I agree with him, and to the great furor of some of my Spinozian friends, I referred to Harman to criticize Spinoza. Which part? People usually celebrate this as Spinoza's non-essentialism, how Spinoza equates power and right. For Spinoza, justice means that every entity, every object, is allowed to freely deploy its inherent power potentials. That is, the amount of justice owed to me equals my power. If I have certain substantial potentials to do something in a just society, I will be able to actualize these potentials. A right is for Spinoza always a right to do something, to act upon things according to your nature, not the judicial abstract right to possess things and so on. But unfortunately, Spinoza himself uses an example at the very end of his Tractatus Politicus, where he, based on this equation of right and power, he argues for the natural inferiority of women. I quote Spinoza, "If by nature women were equal to men and were equally distinguished by force of character and ability, in which human power and therefore human right chiefly consist, surely among nations so many and different, some would be found where both sexes rule alike, and others where men are ruled by women, and so brought up, that they can make less use of their abilities. And since this is nowhere the case, one may assert with perfect propriety that women have not by nature equal right with men." Now, I must tell you that when I presented in a conference, at a Spinoza conference in LA more than 10 years ago, when I read this passage, a Spinoza partisan exploded and said that he is aware of this passage, but that he thinks that this is like he even made a paranoiac hypothesis that maybe some evil follower of Spinoza falsified it and put this in because it's so against the nature of Spinoza thought. No, I don't think it is. I think that here I agree with Jean-Claude Milner, who will visit us hopefully in October. I have many critical points against Milner, but he is right in desacralizing Spinoza. It's, for me, a big enigma why in the last decade Spinoza was almost elevated to the, not only by Deleuze, by Althusser and so on, to the sacred, untouchable name and so on. And here I think Harman is right. In Spinoza's notion of women, the potentiality of women to act in a different way, not as inferior to men, disappears since he reduces women to the actuality of their social relations where they are, or rather, were, in his time, subordinated to men. But what I think, nonetheless, here I disagree with Harman, is that it's not necessary to substantialize or naturalize this excess in the sense of deep in myself as an autonomous thing, I have much higher potentials and so on, which are not allowed fully to actualize themselves in concrete relations, determinate particular relations in which I live. I think that other partisans of assemblage theory, like Latour and Delanda, are much more productive here when they try to account for this gap by the inherent antagonistic nature of relations themselves. Often an entity which is thrown in a new constellation finds itself in a contradictory situation that a possibility opens up for this entity to develop, to deploy new potentials, but at the same time these potentials are blocked, are sabotaged. So I claim that we can also account for new possibilities. In different uses, a certain object can be put to through precisely in a purely relational way. This is why I don't agree with Harman, again, who claims that relations are constraining, but properties are much wider. His idea is that, for example, if he were to be a feminist, I'm not so sure, that women have properties, reason, abilities, which allow for much greater equal to men, social role, activity, and so on, but the social relations in which they live constrains them, does not allow the use of these relations. I don't like this simplistic logic. I would have said that the least we can say is that the opposite also holds, that we have certain properties, and, but we are not constrained by our properties, because these limited properties can be expanded when we are or enter a new set of relations. To give you an idea of this, which I often use, this example, let me evoke human rights. As you know, I'm a little bit sick and tired of that old example Marxist of how human rights are abstract human rights, which de facto privilege just the rights of certain strata, white men, of property, and so on. It's true. But from the very beginning, the antagonism was there. Which is why, as you know, maybe better than me, immediately afterwards, after the proclamation of the rights of men, women, Mary Wollstonecraft and others said, why not also us? Slaves in Haiti said, why not also us? And so on and so on. That's what I mean. How I think we can explain this without any reference to raw naturalization, human nature, and so on and so on. I think that that's the dialectic of historical development, that it opens up possibilities, but at the same time it crashes them. And then we live in this relative opening. That's the tragedy, but also the hope of capitalism. although it limits our freedom, alienation, work, and so on, we should never forget that, we should never forget that the very, and Marx is very clear on this, yes, capitalism will wage slavery, blah, 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 but the very horizon from which we can see how capitalism limits our freedoms is opened by capitalism itself. You? Yes?
So, just clarification, so you're saying human rights as a mode of relation between the revolutionary moment and ancien regime opens up the possibility for further claims
yes.
in the name of human rights?
Not even French Revolution, you had it in the air before, no, to be exact.
Right, but you're saying, you're reproaching O, the dualism of properties and relations. You're saying that kind of dualistic approach, there is more properties than relations, or more relations than properties.
No, for them properties are more.
Right, but the Latour it would be the other way around.
Yeah,
you're saying
and I'm on Latour's side here.
And you're reproaching that dualism as such, right?
Not,
and you're
not,
saying that it's the relation that opens up the possibility for the emergent properties.
Yes.
So human rights is the relation between the revolutionary moment and ancien regime that then opens up the possibilities for women's rights, for rights of slaves, and so on and so forth. And
because form matters. That's my further Hegelian moment. Right. Marx is usually totally misunderstood when he criticizes formal democracy. Right. Marx is a Hegelian, which means form. For Marx, in the tension between form and content, the moment of truth is always on the side of form. And this is not just with human rights. Remember how Marx develops capital. Sorry, but finish. I interrupted you.
I just want to make sure that we're following you correctly.
Yes.
So it's in crude form. This is an argument for the priority of formal relation.
Yes, absolutely.
Against the background of an emergent formal relation, further relations can emerge that over time can become fixed properties. Like women's rights, human rights, and so on and so forth.
Yes,
but
precisely.
But that sequence is not reversible. So it's again, it's an argument against flatness. This is what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
it's an argument against flatness. And the basic reproach to O is that you cannot have a consistent ontology without an exception. And that an exception
that would be a more complex argument. I wanted to come.
This is what you. This is where you're going.
But again, as you said, my problem would be not only with human rights, but also at other. Okay, I will put it this way.
Just an example, just to clarify the conceptual
Well, for example,
point,
I will return to the example which I used probably only this year in this class 2-3 times. That unfortunate, eternally repeated. I know that you also wanted to. Sorry to say this. I cannot resist it. I'm so evil. You wanted to put your finger and mess with men's business. So I humiliate myself to it now.
No, it's just, where would you put Badiou's event, Cantorian infinity, which suggests that something can emerge when there's no condition for it, formally or in terms of properties? Badiou's event, when some kind of...
You touch such a crucial, difficult problem here, because, you know, first, Badiou is a very refined thinker, and he would not just say when there is simply no condition for it. He would have said, he uses a very ambiguous term, ontologically ambiguous, but he has to use it. He speaks of pre-event levental situation or what, where when the situation is chaotic, contradictory, that's an opening for the event. But the big problem is this one, and I appeal to you here, because this is my eternal struggle with Badiou. To put it very simply, and I hope, because I repeat so much myself, my own stuff, that I can count on you knowing the purest elementary basic features of Badiou's ontology. When Badiou has this duality of the order of being, and then from time to time it's cut short or interrupted by an event. Okay, I ask you a stupid question, as stupid as possible. Is this a genuine ontological duality, or is all there is nonetheless ultimately the multitude of beings? Badiou oscillates here. He admitted this to me. Because at some point he says we are not idealists, or that there is the order of being, multiplicity of being, and he says he uses this very twisted, and once I reproached him I was evil, Deleuzian expression, that an event is just, how do you call it, a detour, a reversal, whatever, a twist in the order of being.
A fold.
Sorry?
Like a fold.
Like a fold, yes, in the order of being. But nonetheless, he absolutely prohibits the deduction, this he would never have done, the deduction of the event from the order of being. Causality is here always retroactive. His formula would have been this one. An event becomes possible only through its actualization. In the ordinary state of things, we have possibilities, some of them are actualized, some of them are not, but an event is something where actualization precedes possibility. It's not there are many possibilities, some of them actualize themselves, is that something, of course, not impossible in the physical sense, but impossible in the more ideological sense. Something that was not considered possible happens, and through happening it retroactively creates its own possibility. I will now consciously repeat myself, my old example, but just to make it plastic for you. I think great example here is, my God, Borges. You know Borges, no, just evil, the well-known writer who got a big prize from Pinochet, you know. You will always get this from me. And you know what Ernesto Laclau told me? That he was at one of the last talks when he was already blind by Borges. And you know, Borges said, I cannot see. Could somebody tell me, are there any N? Okay. I still have some politically correct decency. I don't like the word N for black people, but he used this word because they should leave it. I don't want to give classes for them and so on. You know what I like so much? And incidentally, if you think that I'm brutal, look at that guy. What I want to say is this shocked me. How Ernesto Laclau, who reproaches me often for my vulgarities, he reproached me and so on. There, all of a sudden, because Borges is Borges, he said, oh, what a wonderful irony of the old master, and so on and so on. It's incredible how we are at some point hypocritical. Another point that I have of this is Wagner versus Nietzsche. Are we aware, nonetheless, what a brutal racist Nietzsche was? He praised ancient India, where, you know, different estates were totally correct. That was okay. You remember how he was ferociously against Paris Commune. He heard the rumor, which was a false one, that Communard burned some museums, and he exploded, like this is Sclaven rebellion, the revolt of slaves, killed them all, and so on. But what I find so interesting is that if you read these postmodern leftist readings of Nietzsche, they reduce Nietzsche to his abstract logical analysis. All this political background is totally obliterated. I know I'm not bluffing. For example, go through both books by Deleuze on Nietzsche. You would never have guessed what Nietzsche was politically from Deleuze. On the other hand, Wagner is over-analyzed, you know. Even if he appears to be clean, oh, look, the way that actor laughs, it's really a cynical imitation of Jews and so on and so on. You look for all the traces. So these are very enigmatic things. But let me go on what we were talking about. What I want to say is that that old example that I used, coffee, you know, coffee without cream, without blah blah. Look, as Harman would have put it, and here I also refer to Delanda, who provides, I think, a nice answer, correct one. Harman wouldn't agree with it, non-essentialist answer to, if there is an essence of the thing, we clearly fall too flat if we just talk about fluid properties of things. There are some type of essences which make things what they are, and Delanda proposes a nice term diagram of things. diagram in the sense of the space of all potentials, what a thing can be, can become, and so on. And I would say that precisely this is what Harman doesn't take into account, that a diagram of a thing, all its possible permutations and so on, this is a term you already find in Deleuze and Guattari, that a diagram of things, all the potentialities of a thing are precisely linked to circumstances. For example, since, very vulgar example, since, where does coffee come from? It does from Latin America, no? Or am I stupid? It does, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I doubt it. As far as I know, no, but I'm not sure. They probably didn't drink it with coffee or with cream, with cream or with milk. So today, only in our network of relationship, coffee has this diagram. Frappuccino, milk, and so on and so on. It's a very simple example, but you see what I'm aiming at. What I'm aiming at is to claim against that there is a relatively stable essence of things, but this essence is precisely the network of potentialities. What do I mean by it? So that again, only in certain set of relations, like our culture, maybe also others, I don't know, but in our, coffee has all these potentialities. You can see them when you walk to Starbucks and you have all those long lists there, whatever. And I would also say another example that I will give you. It's a slightly pathetic one. You also want, now I will be cynical. Are you asking a question or just stretching your hair? Your head?
Probably both.
I got her.
A network of possibilities only in the actualization.
No. A network is precisely over, actually. Over actualization in this sense that, for example, with modernity, being equal, talking, engaged politically, become part of a diagram of women. Even if it's not actualized, it's there as a diagram, it exists. But okay, but isn't it that if with early modernity, women being free, having political rights, right to public space appearances, if this were not to be perceived as part of the diagram of being a woman would not have demanded these rights. Isn't it that somehow, and that was the true revolution of modernity, in ancient times, this was simply not part of feminine identity. Okay, we can argue now, did already Antigone, because the beauty of Antigone is that although she is for conservative values, like family right, the crucial tension of Antigone is between content and form. The greatest of Antigone is not what he wants, but that he wants it in the public space as a public gesture. And that's the beauty of Antigone, although as to the content of what she wants, it's just the alt-right conservative, the form, the way he does it. You know who was, now I will be absolutely evil towards Americans here, one of the really disgusting anti-feminists. If you are old enough, you must remember her. That American neocon icon when I was young, 30, 40 years ago. Does the name ring a bell to you? Phyllis Schlafly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we discovered it. You know what was so ironic? She was aware of this, that although she was radically neoconservative, but nonetheless, by the very form of her appearance, she was acting slightly in contrast with her views. And you know what was the ridiculous way that she tried to counteract it? I saw it on video years ago. When, before she gave public speech, she always thanked her husband for allowing her to quit home and appear there. But in a way it was arrogance, because it was absolutely perceived as ironic and so on, you know. But you know, so sorry, I hope I made it clear now. It is in this sense that the true revolution is not actual rights, gaining actual rights. Okay, it's very important, my God, to get them. But the true revolution is to change the diagram, the possibilities. That something, your essence changes, not your essence in the essentialist thing, but like already, this is how it works. These are beautiful stories, how even at the most radical point of French Revolution, they still wanted to limit women's role, and then in some demonstrations, some women died. And if some of you know better French history than me, you must know, because then some woman famously said, and it convinced all the true Democrats leftists, like, sorry, but if we are good enough to die for you, for our freedom, shouldn't we also have the right, and so on. You see what I mean? The crucial change is, in this sense, the crucial change is a transcendental change. Not transcendental in any mystical sense, but the change in your diagram, in what are your potentials. That's the most difficult change. Once you get this, the battle is in itself already won. Then it's just a matter of how do you go on, and so on and so on. This is why in modernity, all the conservative modernists had great problem because they had to admit these potentials, you know. But how to nonetheless justify the fact that, as conservative liberals like to say, with black freedom and so on, with feminism, in principle you are right, but we should do it carefully, not so fast, and so on and so on. For example, one of the most disgusting strategies in the United States just before the Civil War was to say, yes, blacks deserve freedom, but for freedom you have to be educated. And if we just give directly freedom to the blacks, they will not be able to use it because they don't have enough of a cultural background, so they will just regress into some kind of barbarism and so on. So, and this is the trick. The claim was that in the interest of the long-term freedom of black people, they should be still kept under control, to be properly educated for the right moment when they will be able to be free. This was a more twisted strategy than the classical conservative one, the most disgusting, which was, look at black people, if they are properly taken care of by a good master, they are really happy. You know, this crazy idea that black people are happy as slaves if they have a good master. That if you plant into their heads ideas of freedom politics, you just confuse them, they become unhappy, or whatever, and so on and so on. But so, again, another, and here, why do I prefer this notion of diagram of possibilities as essence? Because essence here is not, the point is, I think, to elaborate a non-essentialist notion of essence. Essence, it's this ambiguity, like it was not yet there before it was discovered, but once it is discovered, it's discovered as if it already was there. Okay, let me give you, I'm sorry, a slightly obscene but very benevolent example from sexuality. When you have a couple exploring their love relationship and so on and so on, isn't it that, I'm sorry, now I sound romantic, I myself don't believe in it, but maybe you can put it in this way, that a truly good lover, oh, I'm saying this, I never was there, but a truly good lover does not only satisfy you, he awakens even new ways, new desires of what you want, of how to be satisfied. You know, it's not just, I will do what you want. No, you must not tell me, that's the beauty. Good lover is not a master who tells you you really want it. Good lover is someone who, the way she interacts with you, makes you discover into yourself new potentials of sexual satisfaction. And I think it's the same for a true teacher, master in the sense of teacher. He does not just teach you, but he, as it were, enables you to discover what you really want, your freedom. You know, that's even the function of a good political revolutionary leader. He is a master, but not a Stalinist master who knows better than you what you really want. It's only through him or her that you discover what you really want. That's the true function of the, let's call it naively, positive master. And this goes to the end, in the sense that you can discover that you don't need him and you chop off his or her head. I don't have any problems with this. But you still need him as this intermediary role. So, you see what I'm aiming at? In this sense, I claim we should, I wanted to focus on this refined ambiguity. You discover what you want. In a way, it is a substantial self-discovery. It's not just, for example, let me return to that slightly tasteless example of a lover. It's not simply that he or she teaches me new ways to enjoy. No, in a way, you discover new potentials in yourself. But it's not simply that he taught you something new, or she. But at the same time, it's wrong to say that it was already there before. It was and it wasn't. It was as an abstract potentiality, you know. It was there in the same way that, for example, coffee, with or without milk, is already in the notion of coffee. But it's in a totally abstract way. You want to say something, please?
I mean, isn't it in the mediation? The mediation impacts on the potential that you discover in yourself.
Yeah, but mediation...
It is mediated, it's not...
But nonetheless, what I want to say is that this mediation is also a mediation of, to put it in Hegelian terms, of the immediacy itself, in the sense of, once in this immediate way, you discover what you are or what you want, you perceive this once you discover your political potentials, your erotic potentials, your productive potentials. You immediately experience them as yours.
Whether they're yours or not.
They are yours or not, yes. That's so, in what sense? In the sense that, this is very, that's the big Hegelian motive. It's not only that all immediacy is mediated, but that all mediation ends up in a new immediacy. Like, that's why I quoted Badiou. He asked this question, and it's a beautiful question, maybe you can help me. Like, im usually designates negation. Like, immediacy means negated mediation, no? Or immortality, negated mortality. Okay, but you take this wonderful example, imbecile. Who is the becile or what? Nobody knows. I tried to look it up in some thesaurus or whatever. They don't like. That's why I think this is the one of my subchapters in the Hegel book, that this book is dedicated to all beciles or what, not imbeciles, but whatever. I try even to construct becile as the notion, my triad, it's totally artificial, I'm laughing, is the lowest, I'm sorry, it's a racist term, we use it, Mongoloids and imbeciles. But in between are beciles, at least. Forget about it. So, again, but whatever, so you know, the big formula of Hegel is that, again, mediation is always, immediacy is always mediated immediacy. That it's not that things begin with immediacy and then get mediated. No, every immediacy. And in this sense, I will give you a super example of this subject. Subject is precisely absolute mediation elevated to a new immediacy. Immediacy of me being immediately myself, yes?
Just very briefly, because Stephen Frosch was talking about Moses and monotheism.
Yeah.
It seems that the Freud struggled with the figure of Moses as the founder of the Jewish people and the emergence of a new historical subject through Exodus. It seems to could be useful to illustrate this dynamic and this bizarre idea that he must be an exception, that relational element, like let's say human rights, that triggers the installation of a new order of relationality has also to be an exceptional moment, an exceptional element. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Just as Moses is an exceptional element of the Jewish people, that's the force of Freud's insight. And it's something that his frame of thinking, which is teleological, genetic, positivist, cannot accommodate, and that's the book is so ruined. Because 3 times he tries to make this argument, but his kind of genetic Hegelian logic cannot
agree
accommodate.
Totally here with you, because I also think that this is why, precisely when Freud, in the ultimate result, ruins everything, he is usually at his best, but then cannot do it, because I prefer here, I like here Lacan's reasoning, which is that how the ruin begins with Oedipus complex. First, Lacan elaborated Oedipus complex. Then, obviously, it's circular, it doesn't work. So, already to account for totem and taboo, Primordial Father, it's basically a reaction to Oedipus. And Lacan points out here in a beautiful way that it's not that, but then here he also gets caught. Because Freud's official myth in Totem and Taboo, his version, is that first we have this brutal primordial father, having all women and so on, then the sons get together, kill him, the dead father returns as symbolic authority, we are in Oedipal order. Lacan does something quite convincing here. He turns it around. Not only primordial father never existed, primordial father is the retroactive myth to cover up a gap in the symbolic father. So primordial father comes afterwards. I claim even symbolically, like today, we are getting paternal figure, insofar as it disappears the standard one. Then I claim it is split now into 2 figures. One would be really elements, like even with Trump, you have something of this primitive primordial father and so on. On the other hand, it's like one of us in the sense of no paternal dignity, but a vulgar guy who wants to compete with us in vulgarity and so on and so on. So fathers today are at the same time competitors, like elder brothers, and more primordial fathers. I think primordial father is a post-Oedipal appearance. So,
but isn't Trump the moment where he specifically plays that figure when he makes a comment about his daughter? I would date her if she was not my daughter. So we're going to now, not simply him appearing as such a father, but explicitly embracing the role of the primal father.
No, I agree with you. Also, I think this is also the point of all those, even for me, a well-known person of bad taste. I didn't like it. You remember that infamous interview, which was, no interview, conversation recorded, where Trump was boasting how he can, I will not go into further details, touch women and so on and so on. These are elements of primordial father, yes.
They're deployed deliberately.
Do you mind finishing the point about the subject?
Oh, I go into this now, very good. Because, sorry, I got lost here, I admit it. Dirty guy, you applauded her. Brutal attack on me, you are on my blacklist. Sorry.
No, because you were interrupted many times.
Yeah, but I was, unfortunately, self-critically, I must say, I was also interrupting myself, my own life, with my improvisations. So, let's go on. Where does here subjectivity enter? Before I tell you where I enter, I will check the hour. Oh no, we have time. Everything is okay. Don't worry. Yes. The result of all this, of what... Okay, let me improvise a little bit. It will be dense, I warn you, but I will keep my word. I will send you this stuff to Medicine tonight. So address her, because I really feel bad. But again, for object-oriented guys, especially this substantialist line, Harman, Brian Levy, who believe in an impenetrability of every object. And you can guess already from that, every object has a hidden side. Impenetrable is much more wealthy than it appears to us, and so on and so on. And Levy-Brian tries to introduce in this way psychoanalysis into object-oriented theory. He claimed that since we as subjects are also another version of objects, what Freud calls unconscious is precisely this invisible depth side of a human person. Ego is the visible side, the way we appear to ourselves, and so on and so on. But the invisible, deeper side is the unconscious part of our psyche. In other words, ego, consciousness, is relational, how I relate to others, symbolic communication. Unconscious is more autistic, deep in me. Now, if there is something that Lacan opposes to, it's this. For him, subject is purely relational. In what sense? My book, which I already said, but I really mean, if some of you are so stupid as to be minimally interested in one of my books, if you want to read one, do. I really think, if somebody were to ask me at a gunpoint, one book of you, which one I should read, I would say Absolute Recoil. Because I struggle precisely with this. Absolute Recoil is a book of post-coital depression after less than nothing. After writing 1,000 pages, I discovered I missed the crucial thing, you know, and I tried to put it there. Okay, the story goes on. Then I discovered that I missed the crucial thing there, it's in disparities, and it goes on. But okay, very seriously, you know what's the idea of absolute recoil? Very simply. Imagine a substantial entity which expresses, actualizes itself in its effects. But for Hegel already, you get at the point of, I simplified very much, of absolute reflection, where it's not only that a thing which somehow, at least logically, pre-exists its effects, expresses itself, causes them, and so on, but it's when this reflection in causes becomes absolute in the sense that it retroactively posits their own cause. And like, okay, I will give you, maybe I already mentioned it, I hate the movie, but nonetheless, the most stupid Hugh Grant movie, it was a hit 20 years ago, maybe you saw it, 4 Weddings and a Funeral. Yes. Okay. But do you remember that famous scene when Hugh Grant makes a love declaration to Andy McDowell, and he gets confused, cannot say it properly, and of course, it's so primitive that I'm ashamed to tell you, but the point is that precisely through all these failures and his true charming love comes through and so on, you know. So, you see the paradox is this closed circle. Something tries to express itself. It fails. Through this failure, it retroactively becomes what it is. In a direct expression, it would dissolve itself. Even Adorno mentions sometimes this paradox in a very nice way. I think that somewhere in a beautiful, you know better Adorno than me, but doesn't he say something of how old recordings with all their scratches and so on give a much more realist effect that there was really a singer there singing than this more modern, perfect, stereo, whatever, recordings. In other words, this would be absolute recoil. Something fails to express itself, but it doesn't something exists only through its failure to be. Something is absolutely coexistent with its failure. If it succeeds to be, it no longer is. And that would be for me the minimal Hegelian even definition of subject. Subject is a failure. If it's not a failure, it becomes simply a substance. Now, let me go on. I will come to it to give you another example. And I mean it in all sincerity. I hope you will not explode. LGBT plus. No, but now it's more. No fun intended. LGBTQ, whatever. They add a plus at the end. And I'm not making fun of them in quite honorable way. The idea is that when we propose a classification of all possible sexual identities, the list is never perfect. So is this endless? Maybe there will be another identity, we did not take into account all of them, and so on. Now, the big logical problem for me here is this plus just a sign of possible additions, like plus means I cannot, the list would be too long, or I cannot because we don't know them yet, or I cannot because we didn't yet even constitute them, but like an ersatz signaling a possible but never actualized full list, or, here comes the beauty, or is plus an identity of its own? And that would be my Lacanian solution. You have LGBTQ plus, the right to say I'm plus, I'm just that plus. But I'm not that plus in some postmodern dynamic sense of I have no definitive identity, I'm plastic, today I'm this, tomorrow I'm that, but I'm plus as a perfect specific identity. And I even claim, that's the beauty of it, I even claim that, sorry, I'm trying to find where I enumerated them. I claim that if you look closely at LGBTQ classifications, you can find those 32 or whatever identities. I found 2, even 3 sometimes contenders for this plus, in the strict sense that they add a category which is a stand-in for the lack, for the failure of classification. You know, I use here my old examples. For example, I'm sorry if I repeat myself to many of you, Marx, where he cheats in his classification of modes of production. It's primitive societies, so-called, pre-class societies, Asiatic mode of production, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and whatever shit, Stalinism, communism, you see coming later. It's clear, if you read Marx closely, that there is a problem with Asiatic mode of production. It's clear Marx was very cautious with it, and to simplify the logic, I would have said this. First came the definition of mode of production, which perfectly fits just the 5 modes. Primitive societies, an improper name of course, slave society, feudalism, capitalism, communism. Then Marx encountered here and there a series of societies, ancient Egypt, ancient China and India, old Latin American empires, which didn't fit all others, the existing. And I claim Asiatic mode of production is this, to use the difficult term, placeholder of the lack. It appears to be one positive category among the others, but it really just means all those who do not fit any of the previous elements. And the big dialectical thesis is that it's precisely this additional symptomatic element which subjectivizes the series. So again, for me, you know what would have been at its briefest? I don't have time to go with, if you want, better than in my next book. Alenka Zupancic, her book will be out in 2 months with MIT, a book with a rather stupid title, What is Sex? She was furious, but MIT Press insisted on this title. She wanted something more boring philosophic, like sex and ontology. They said, no, what is sex will be better. Then she said, but sorry, if there is, she said, that was her defense, I loved it. She said, but listen, this is a confused theoretical book. If there is something you will not learn in it, it was in text. They said, no, it will sell better. Then she wanted, as a cover of the book, she found a young Polish painter, a lady, maybe you know it, maybe she's famous, I don't know, a wonderful portrait of Adam and Eve leaving paradise, but in a bag, dragging a bag full of apples. They said, no. All of a sudden they said, no, it's too comical. But then she said, Alenka, she showed me correspondence, she said, but that's my thesis. Sex is ultimately a comedy. It's not a tragedy. That's romantic bullshit. No, then so nonetheless, so it's what is sex? And then to appease her, what a stupid solution, the MIT put is in italics, you know, like what is sex? And she laughed so much like, oh, now we have a Heideggerian twist. What is sex? You know, the essence of being of sex, whatever, you know. So, okay, let's go on. So, she developed this formula, I envy her. You see, these are the truly great philosophers. I did already write about this LGBT+, but I mumbled around in a confused way, and she proposed of the best definition I can imagine of Lacan's notion of sexual difference. She said that the usual LGBT classification is 33, however, and then plus, because the list is not complete, no? But he says Lacan's thesis is that it works with one. That the original ontological difference is not MF, masculine versus feminine. If you do this, you are in yin-yang and all those primitive sexualized ontologies. Our universe is the struggle of masculine and feminine principle. That the minimal formula is M plus. M for masculine, the only identity, and plus for feminine. Wait a minute, don't explode. The point is not we men are the only ones who are, women are just that, have abandoned. No, no, no. The name of that plus is hysterical questioning. We don't know what. In other words, the plus as a state, as a place signaling subjective. That's why, as Alenka shows in a wonderful way, men are objective idiots who think they are what they are. Men who is not minimally hystericized, and many of us unfortunately are not, they simply think they are really men. Men who think that he is a man, that's the closest you come to stupidity, I claim. That's why I'm so sad that Jacqueline is not here, because, you know, she said yesterday, no, the day before, something wonderful, when she said, like, do I remember it correctly? Men kill women, women laugh at men. Yeah. I wanted to elaborate this because it gets even more complex. The standard male formula of much violence against women is, I want to kill her because she laughs at me. You know, the ultimate male chauvinist horror is, I didn't really impress her, she laughs at me, at my impotence, whatever you want, and so on. But back to plus. M means a certain identity. Plus means, am I really that identity? And that's, for Lacan, this impossibility to recognize yourself in your substantial identity is the basis of hysterical questioning. That's why, for Lacan, subjectivity as such is hysterical. This does not mean the male chauvinist wisdom, you know, women know our duty, women are confused, hysterical. No, it means the stupidity of us men. It means, again, as already developed years ago here, hysteria is, for Lacan, the basic form of critique of ideology. Ideology, the function of ideology in a society is to provide you or impose on you a certain symbolic identity. You are what you are, what society says that you are. Master, mother, pupil, worker, whatever. The original hysterical questioning is, why am I what you, the big other, the social order, why am I what you are saying that I am? So, you see how this complicates the usual stupid doxa, according to which object of desire is always lost, and usually this is meant in this extremely stupid way. We don't know what we want, whatever we get, it's always a disappointment, and no. For Lacan, the originally lost object of desire is me, myself, as a subject. As a subject, I never gain access to myself as an object. And this is the plus. Men are ontologically stupid. Women's identity is based on self-questioning, which means, let's go a step further, that, and that's crucial for Lacan. Sexuality does not simply mean the question is always open in epistemological sense. Sexuality is a mystery, we never know what it really is. No, sexuality is a mystery not only for us but for itself, in the sense of this failure to be defines, sexualizes a situation. Sexuality without failure is not sexuality. It's failure as such which sexualizes a situation. That's why, for Lacan, maybe he's wrong, it's another topic. Animal coupling is not sexual in a specific human sense. It's just, you know, you have this stupid call to mate for mating, blah, blah, you do it. It's just another instrumental activity. But what, you see my point? It's not simply that human sexuality is failed, in the sense that it cannot ever be fully symbolized, it always fails. No, it's that this failure itself sexualizes this situation. And here, I don't have time to go into it, you will get the paper now in 2 hours. Here, subjectivity enters. And here, I think the theory of, another point first about this Marx system, production systems, and so on and so on. Where am I, in a very, I claim relatively, not very, I will not boast myself, refined way critical of Laclau. Laclau only has this logic of hegemony. You have these freely floating ideological elements, ecology, production, human rights, femininity, sexual identity, and then you build chain of equivalences through one element, which is privilege, which stands for it all. And Laclau's big example are political struggles. For example, in a moment of mega tension, like in communist countries, the last moment when communist regimes were falling apart. No matter what you were, a conservative, an anarchist, a critical Marxist, we were all united against communists in power. Then, of course, the moment they stepped down, everything get confused. But what I want to say is that, on the one hand, we get this hegemonic structure, which means, as I develop it, that there is no neutral. You know, Marx says this beautifully in his introduction to Grundrisse. How? That's his example. In every mode of production, a certain particular production colors the entire universal production. For example, as he says, in capitalism, industrial production is one specific sphere of production, but which, as Marx puts it, provides a specific color for all other modes. Like even agriculture gets organized like production, university research gets organized at another sphere of production. So we have this structure of hegemony. The exception is here the particular element which succeeds in imposing itself as hegemonic, which stands for the all. But I claim, even Marx was not aware, that we have another exceptional element, which is not the hegemonic one, but the 0.1. For example, in Marxism it would have been proletarians, or for Hegel it would have been rebel, Pöbel, those who have no place in social hierarchy. They also are the exception. They are the element which, they are like Asiatic mode of production. They are a part of society, but they embody within society for what there is no place in society. They embody the negativity of society. And I claim, what Laclau misses, doesn't develop it as far as I know, is that the ultimate antagonism is the antagonism between these two exceptions, universalities. The ruling ideology means it imposes its own particular image of human being as universal. The counter movement, it's not just let's oppose it with our hegemony, but let's focus on those who are nothing, who are excluded from this universality, but as such they stand for universality and so on and so on. Okay, let me nonetheless quickly return to subjectivity and exception. So, again, for Hegel and Marx, this is what Hegel meant when he says the point is not to grasp the absolute only as substance, but also as subject. If I may translate it in my terms, not only as M, but also as plus. Plus is that surplus, a void, which is the dynamic element, which introduces a gap, which cannot be identified. And again, now I'm coming back to my concluding point about criticizing this object-oriented ontology idea of material, of hidden side of objects. Maybe there is something, for example, let's take me, if I am one, I doubt sometimes, as a human being person. Okay, you can say there is a superficial side of me, and then there is something deeper. But for Lacan, and you don't have to be a Lacanian here, it's for Kant, for Hegel, the specificity of subject is that it's not an appearance of something, but it's an appearance of nothing. It's appearance itself which makes subject. Of course, I as a subject have a material base, some stupid brain processes or whatever, but it's a classical depressive argument. You know, you cut open my brain, you will see a shitty, bad-smelling piece of meat. The subject is not there. The subject is, as Fichte put it, Tathandlung, activity. It's an act which exists only in its activity. It doesn't have a substantial existence outside it. And for Lacan, the unconscious strictly remains at this phenomenal level. Unconscious is not some deep biological or whatever, even psychic content. This is what Jung thought. For Lacan, unconscious is like, you remember yesterday I was improvising about the big other, which is out there as a purely virtual point of reference. It exists only through my incessant activity. And so that would have been an idea of subject, where I see a certain continuity between German idealism and then Lacan and so on. It's a self-relating zero in the sense that the subject appears to itself, but not in the sense that something deeply hidden appears in the subject. The subject is its own appearance, which is why appearance is reflexively redoubled. What do I mean by this? As Lacan knew it, but he didn't know, I think, that he referred to Hegel there. Appearance is, for Lacan, a deeply ambiguous term. Appearance is not simply appearance of something, in the sense that this is how things appear, but something deeper appears in appearances. The ultimate appearance is precisely the appearance that there is something behind the appearance. The ultimate illusion is the illusion that there is something deep behind the appearance. I think I didn't mention it here, Bani Sasve. I didn't mention in these last 3 days that you will get this very clearly if I tell you the classical story, Zeuxus Parasios, you know, two Greek painters who were competing who will do the better mimetic illusion. And the first one painted grapes so perfect that stupid birds hit the painting trying to eat them. But you know what the other guy did who won the competition? He painted a veil. And the first painter comes there, just a curtain, a veil, and says, okay, now, how do you call it? What do you do with veil?
Unveil.
Unveil it so that I see what is behind. That was the trick, nothing. It was just the painting of the veil, you know. And Hegel uses this in phenomenology as even a metaphor for our soul and so on. Our soul is such a veil. It's just a veil, painted veil. Isn't this a kitschy novel by Somerset Maugham? That's another story. It's painted, but so you see there is depth, but this illusory depth, and even we should bring back here the example I think that I mentioned yesterday. You remember of those Catholic Darwinists who claimed that God created fossils directly and so on. So this idea that, you know, the problem with object-oriented ontology is that since for them everything that exists are objects, so for them the only way to grasp subject is to make out of it a mega-object. And then of course you have this common sense counterpoint, but why should this object be endlessly important? Isn't it always one among the objects? But again, for Lacan and already from Hegel, subject is in a way even less than an object. Subject is a failed object. Subject is like the plus. Something that cannot ontologically... Are you just... Do you want to ask a question or just sticking out?
I'm asking.
Okay, please. Yeah.
Yes, I'm wondering, I can follow your argument. Yeah, I'm wondering about the relationship between subjectivity as an activity that is an activity of failure, in contrast to subjectivity as passivity, when you mentioned 2 days ago Husserl's epopee and the Cartesian pure subject, this withdrawal of the subject, because of course I can see the resemblances, negativity.
I think that the second one is original. Yeah. In the sense that at its deepest level, subjectivity is not an activity. It is clear with Kant, with Hegel, Schelling saw this wonderfully. Subjectivity is at its utmost what mystics call night of the world and so on. It's a kind of a proto-psychotic breakdown, withdrawal to the 0 point, to nothing, an abyss. And then, you know where you can find a nice example of this? In his reading of Schreber, one of his 5 famous cases, Freud makes a wonderful remark where he says we usually take these paranoiac constructions as the sign of madness. But Freud says no, the true madness is the catastrophe, total psychic breakdown, and these paranoiac symptoms, they are precisely wild attempts to pull yourself out of madness. And of course then, Lacan tries to radicalize it, maybe he goes too fast, too far, and says that we should even here obliterate the distinction between normal construction and paranoia, and claim that we are all, as normal people, just psychotics who try to pull ourselves out. But you know, it's so interesting. Who is here the true genius? Who already, the first one who formulated this. Oh my God, this is a nice part. Hegel, his encyclopedia, the first chapters of his anthropology and so on, the beginning of philosophy of spirit, where Hegel is in a way more Foucauldian. I'm referring to Michel Foucault than Foucault himself. Hegel totally admits this, that the only way to be human is that basically human spirituality is a way to avoid madness. How do we become human? By going, and Hegel says in a very refined Foucauldian way, it doesn't mean we all have to become bad men, but you have to react at least to a potential threat of madness. Without the background of madness, you don't have human spirituality. And Hegel is here not a primitive Hegelian, where in some happy sublation, Aufhebung, all this disappears. No, Hegel says this threat of madness has to remain all the time in the background. So in this sense, I'm tempted to say that, and here I also try in a very more elaborated way to draw a distance between Heidegger and Lacan. Why, in a strange way, Lacan, with all his reference to Heidegger, why Lacan never wanted to abandon the notion of subjectivity? For Heideggerians, this means Lacan is still part of modern imperialist... No, because precisely for Lacan, subjectivity to which he sticks is not this Cartesian technological active object, but is this like that moment of complete madness when the world, this zero level of subjectivity is, that subjectivity originally is a passivity, stepping out of the circle of life and so on.
And is this madness then without self-reflection, without self-consciousness, or is it rather kind of concentrated?
Here you ask a nice question, because you know what I would say here? It's a very interesting point. First, you know where you find this madness? In German idealism, at a very precise point. It's so interesting that till Kant, the metaphor in classical rationalism for subject was also light, was always light, the light of reason. From Kant onwards, the ultimate metaphor for subject is night, darkness. The idea is not I am the light and then maybe there is chaos around me. It's that no, the world can be perfectly rational, but I am the point of madness, darkness of the world. I need externality to escape my madness, which is why, again, I like Schelling. He literally proposes, I think, the only convincing theory of why God created the world, to escape his own madness. It was, if I may put it in ironic terms, it was divine, how do you call it, labor therapy, you know, instead of what they do to you in those primitive psychiatric words, oh, would you weave together that basket and so on. So God did do it, this bullshit in which we live. But you are asking very precise questions here, yes. And I think that all the problems we have today, for example, I didn't have time to develop it, I will maybe when I come back in October, the different ontology of video games, these new obscene forms of immortality and so on, they are all reactions to this point of madness. When you mention the problem of reflection here, I'm tempted to say that this madness is already a minimal form of reflexivity, that it's not some kind of pure, immediate breakdown.
Yeah, it's not substance either.
No, that's crucial. It's not substance. Yeah. It's not substance. It's in a way, again, and again, the big problem is this one. But I'm now jumping very fast. Alenka Zupancic tried to develop it. I did. Then we have here problems because some of our colleagues, like Aaron Schuster, don't want to follow us. How then is this madness possible in our, let's call it naively, natural reality? What we want to avoid is this humanist, ultimately humanist logic, romantic, that, you know, all these romantic descriptions, man, sorry, I don't want to be sexist, by man I mean human being. Human being is a point of madness of nature. That nature in itself is normal, things live there and so on, but when nature gets sick, derailed, this is, humanity is, even early Hegel writes this, is nature which gets sick up to death. This is an old romantic motive. But then this still involves a kind of a break. We have there substantial nature, and then we humans are derailed nature out of joint. Me and Alenka and some others, we are trying to read it in a more radical way. That there is what, from our anthropocentric perspective, appears as madness already in nature itself. That's the topic of quantum physics and all of them. Whatever quantum physics is talking about, it's not nature in the usual sense of the word. It's too crazy. And that what emerges in humanity is a certain, let's call it like this in an anthropocentric way, madness which was always already there in nature itself. It's a much more complex topic, but this is the only way that, and this would be also my approach to, how is he called? Sorry, forget, to Badiou. Badiou still thinks that there is out there the order of being, then, oh my God, we don't know from where negativity, event, this order is interrupted, and so on and so on. My correction to Badiou, he doesn't buy it, of course, is that what he calls the order of being and event doesn't cover all the field. There is something that in German idealism they call negativity, that Freud calls death drive, which is neither one nor the other. That there must be some radical self-destructive aspect, negativity, and that an event is only possible at the background of this negativity. He himself comes close to it when he emphasizes that there is no event without anxiety. But for him, anxiety is just, how should I put it, a retroactive effect of event. Anxiety means that we are in a pre-evental situation. I mean, if you want to see Badiou at his best, let me finish with this advice. Read what I think is his best book, Theory of Subject. I think that there it's his real breakthrough. And then his big fat books, Being and Event, Logical, I'll just attempt to catch up with that one, to systematize it, and again he fails. This is why he's now writing the third book, but it's as if in a confused way. He went, and the most fascinating part of that book is, for me, it's wonderful. His reading of Aeschylus and Sophocles, where he goes in this positive way for Aeschylus, Oresteia, positive event, against this early decadence of Sophocles, anxiety, death. Well, I'm more pro-Sophocles here. I think that you need that darkness to get an event. Like, it's more confused. Sorry, you know what I propose? Where are we now? Oh, okay. Nonetheless, I will keep my word and at least pretend, bluntly lying to your face, that we live in a kind of democracy, so I will do two things. Sorry for the confusion, you must have seen that I wildly improvised, but you will get through Madison today. Now I go to the and I will again discover, this is my cynical remark, I will again discover that fuck life, that air conditioner doesn't work. You know? Try to. But I will immediately send it to Madison, a long text on assemblage and so on, where you will get what I have at this stage. Just please promise me something, otherwise I will hire some mafiosi to come and cut your balls if you have them or what. No, because years ago, I don't know to whom I gave some texts, and then I found them on the web, and my God, my publisher almost prosecuted me, you know. So do whatever you want with them, just don't put them on the web because they may prosecute me. But nonetheless, to save our consciousness, let's play democracy, and if you have some short question, let me try to answer it, because okay. You and you.
It's a short question. Is n plus, is this plus like the Lacanian one of radical difference?
What is Lacanian one of radical difference?
I don't get it really.
Yeah, no, because Lacan, I was not trying to make fun of you, you know. The catch is that Lacan is notorious for how, even sometimes within the same seminar, he changes his position. Yeah. So, I would say that, no, the true problem for me would be this one. Is this plus, but I think it's not, object A or not? Is this the one plus its shadow? I don't think so. And the problem, what I try to elaborate in the last chapter of my absolute recoil is a much more paradoxical ontology, where I begin with plus. And this is also what I call in less than nothing, this negative positivity, something that is less than nothing and can nonetheless exist. So for me, we first have the void and the plus. Then, through a certain symbolic process, whatever you call it, we get 1 plus x plus this 1 plus, and then, through symbolic order, we get 1 plus 1 plus plus, and this plus only. When you have 2 and plus is the object A. So it gets, I try in an almost mystical way, you know, all these mystical speculations, Genesis. I try to develop this. Fuck both of you, what are you laughing at me here? I thought the way you turned at him, you see, I told you what an idiot this guy is. Sorry.
It was just didn't get all the...
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. But what I want to say here really is that I try to develop this logic, so you ask a very crucial question. Which are the primordial elements in Lacan? I don't like those who would like to build an ontology of objects A. You know, like you have void and then you have partial objects. It's not as simple as that. It's closer to signifier. Some signifying cut must be here from the very beginning. I don't like this because it's fashionable in some radical Lacanian circles to claim the symbolic order is secondary and we just begin with some partial objects and so on. Which, no, because I think the beauty of Lacanian reading of Freud is that he demonstrates, you know, how even in the most primitive organization of this polymorphous perversity where you have multiple partial objects, the cut of castration is already there, retroactively. Like, it's not that this genesis is totally false, that, you know, first you have partial objects, blah, blah, then out of nowhere, oh my God, horrible father, castrating agency, and so on. People usually totally miss the point here, the point with which Moses was trying that, you know, this is what people don't get it. The basic feature that the one who is castrated is fundamentally father himself for Lacan. If you just want your own castration, some Kleinian mother is enough who controls you and so on. The big discovery which makes you dwelling in language is not that I have to accept my castration. No, it's that you cannot rely on any big other, that the big other itself is castrating. You lack something, but you will not find it in the big other. That's Lacan's crucial gesture, which I claim, maybe I'm wrong, you find it also. Sorry that I don't collapse. Then maybe one of here, because, you know, right-winger centrist, where is the left? Okay, let's go on.
You talked yesterday a bit about digitalization, which is also a process of reappropriation of public use of reason, and a wider trend in capitalism, a move from exploitation back to rent. My question is very naive. Where do you stand in relation to private property? Because even Hegel is ambiguous here, and I think simple workers' ownership of capital is not going to work anymore, especially because of homo sacer and the almost privileged position that workers have today of being exploited. So, how should we think private property?
First, I agree with you. I don't have a good direct answer, so I will bluff a little bit around. I will begin with what you said, how ambiguous Hegel is, an observation that I always often made, and I want to repeat it. You know, Hegel is reproached that his vision is some kind of even proto-fascist corporate system, but Robert Pippin, who is a conservative liberal, left liberal Hegelian, he made this wonderful observation. You know, Hegel developed his vision of a rational state in his philosophy of right. But do we forget what he says in the most famous part of the introduction to his philosophy of right? You know, when he uses that metaphor of the owl of Minerva, which takes off when there is dusk, and then he says it explicitly. When we can develop its conceptual structure of a certain social system, it means that its time has already passed. Philosophy cannot paint the future, it can only render the conceptual structure of a social system, let's call it epochal system, when its time has passed. Okay, naive question raised by Pippin. Was Hegel really such an idiot that he wasn't aware that this should held also for his own philosophy of right? So I think it's totally wrong to read Hegel's outline of these three states, rational state, as his own program. That's how rational state. No, Hegel was aware, fully aware that its time is past. But nonetheless, to go back to your question, yes, we are maybe over private property, But still, I think we should think radically. I think our goal should not be to say, okay, we went too far with communist dreams, now we can be more modest, and so on and so on. No, I didn't have time, I think, to quote those passages. The one I like, I'm sorry if I used it the last time that I was here, is, you know, a German guy who is a little bit simple, naive, but he has something to say. He's very popular now, more sociologist, economist, Wolfgang Streeck, Verso published some of his texts. His thesis is this one, that capitalism obviously is in deep crisis, it is slowly disintegrating. But Marxism automatically assumed that when capitalism is disintegrating, there is already a new, more progressive power waiting to take over. You know, like we socialists or whatever we are here to take over. But what Marx couldn't imagine is that capitalism is just disintegrating, you know, and there is no clear, feasible alternative that we can think. And that's what makes me really depressed. On the one hand, we have all these protest movements. Great. On the other hand, we have this analysis of disintegrating capitalism. How difficult is to bring these two together? Most of the radical left even mockingly avoids all these topics of capitalism is disintegrating, it no longer functions, and so on and so on. So I think that if anything, the changes will have to be more radical than we can imagine today. I don't think that these easy solutions will work, like we have to keep some more modest capitalism and so on and so on. I think that precisely when you mentioned private property, maybe not private property, but I tend to agree with those, up to a point this German guy, Streeck himself, who claimed, as already hinted, I think, that money is the big problem today. This crazy fictional capital circulation of money. Something will have to be found here to radically change the functioning of money. Maybe in the long term, even in the interest of reproduction of society that we have now. Because as I already pointed out, we live in crazy times today, where billions are just thrown into economy and things don't start to move. Again, Keynesianism here is out. Keynesianism in the sense of this belief. If you, risking some inflation, throw money into it, you trigger, set in motion a development. We are doing this in spite of austerity. And here Varoufakis put it nicely when he said, in the West we talk about austerity. Let's be serious. Austerity for us means, oh, they cut 1% for healthcare and so on. Greece is the only real austerity and some other. Austerity means standard of living falls for 30, 40%, my God, you know. We are not, I think we in the West up to a point, the crisis is real. But we still fake a crisis to avoid it. We talk a lot about crisis in the developed West, but secretly we are still relatively satisfied. Things go on, let's hope they will go on like this. They will not. So, unfortunately, I will be totally open here. I think we will simply have to make very risky decisions. This is what we Lacanians call la réponse du réel, the answer of the real, and so on. So again, I think we will have to, like Lenin, you know what I used in one of my books? I love this metaphor, maybe it's a fake one, that we are, more than in Marx, is in Hegel's. What was Hegel's situation? There was first a radical attempt, the first one at liberation, French Revolution. In his view, I doubt, it went wrong. French Revolution. And Hegel's problem is not a conservative one. His point is how to remain faithful to the legacy of French Revolution and do it again in a better way. Isn't this our predicament today? 20th century tried communism. At least in that forum it failed. The only legitimization of communism today, it's very ironic one, is that where communists are in power, they are the best and most ruthless managers of global capitalism in China, Vietnam, and so on. But my problem is this one. The task today is how fully admitting, assuming all the horrors, Gulag and so on, nonetheless trying to remain faithful to that legacy, not to renounce the legacy itself. And again, I think we cannot any longer afford this simple logic of we know where we are going. In some basic sense, we don't know where we are going. And again, we will just have to make very risky decisions. Okay, sorry, don't kill me, I'm getting tired. If you want to ask me tomorrow. If we will come to that last boring moment it's at 2 across the street, I think. And again, this I'm myopic. Madison, you are there. Yeah, you remember. Sorry, now I'm this kind of terrorizing image, interpellating you. Ah, that would be nice for you to subjectify yourself in this way and say, why I am, what you are saying I am, and so on. Okay, sorry. So again, I will send you a file, and every one of the students, if he or she asks for it, has the right to get it. Okay, see you tomorrow, and fuck life.